Anthony Treash of Pro Football Focus joins us. He will be with us every single Wednesday. Anthony, it's been a while, man. How have you been? And I'll say this, thank you so much for doing this, and I'm looking forward to a really, really fun season talking football with you, my friend.
Yeah, no problem. Things have been going well, just ready for the season. It's a little bit disappointing though, because I have a wedding on Saturday to go to.
Oh,
Very excited.
no.
Yeah.
No. Oh,
I'm
my
yeah.
goodness.
You bet I'm gonna be streaming every single game though, all the way through the
Oh,
ceremony and the
man.
reception. There's no doubt about it. But I'm excited. I can't complain here. We got college football back and a lot of excitement, that's for sure.
Yeah, Anthony, you know what's funny? My sister is actually getting married the Saturday of the South Carolina-Kentucky game. And so I'm praying for a noon kickoff because the wedding is at 5 o'clock. So, whether it's at noon or at night, I'll be able to watch. But obviously, if it's at night, I'm going to be that guy at the reception that's like streaming it on the phone and watching. And like, I don't want to be that guy. You know what I mean? Like, nobody wants to be that guy, but it's like, I mean, you chose this, like, you know what we do. Either way, though, it's
Exactly.
all good. Yeah, it's all good. Anthony, again, man, I'm so excited to chat with you each and every single week because I feel like, we talk to a lot of different personalities, a lot of different people in regards to their thoughts on the game and Gamecocks football. But I feel like you bring a different perspective and a different side due to the numbers, right? And the graders and the way you guys see things at Pro Football Focus. Let's first start with talking about Spencer Rattler. I know we talked about this before when you came on the show a couple months ago, but going into this season, obviously, you are, it's been a mixed bag for Rattler, right, this preseason. It's continued since you and I have chatted. There's some that, think he's overrated, and they look at last year at Oklahoma, he got benched. Then we saw at SEC Media Days, Anthony, I mean, we saw, people saying he's the second best quarterback in the league, and he's going to change Carolina football. You are someone that is very high on Spencer Rattler. I think you had him ranked second nationally among quarterbacks. Just talk about your thoughts on Spencer Rattler, what the grades say about him coming in this season, and how you project his 2022 season.
Yeah, man, I thought I was the highest on Rattler, and then I saw SEC Media Days, and I was like, "Damn, I mean, these guys are going out there." But no, I definitely still have full belief in Spencer Rattler. I think he's quite easily the most underrated player in general in college football heading into the season, and I think it's just one of those. I mean, it's just kind of the way things are. Sometimes people like to pile on one person, and I think just kind of yeah, I don't want to say just like the rumors about the personality stuff, the Netflix documentary. I think all of that played into it more so than just the on-field product. Because if you go back and watch every single throw the last 2 years, you cannot tell me that that's not one of the best quarterbacks in college football. And the data shows that too. I mean, he's actually PFF's highest graded passer since the 2020 season in our database. And you can look at a variety of metrics. I mean, last year his negatively graded throw rate, people wouldn't expect it, but it was one of the lowest in college football. The big thing was last year, we just really didn't see those, special big time throws that we saw the year before in 2020. But I think that kind of has to do, and it's an interesting dynamic that I hope we get an answer to someday, because I'm very curious to see how this kind of played out, because you could see a clear difference in play calling with Lincoln Riley than the year before. And it kind of told me that he just didn't really trust Spencer. He wanted him to be a little bit more quicker and decisive with the decisions, a little bit more careful with the football, not just trying to be Superman and make the hero throw every single play. And that's like a common issue you see with a lot of these young quarterbacks. But I think Lincoln just kind of got caught up with it. And, Coach Riley just kind of took those out of the playbook. And that's where we just really didn't see those as much. But you go back to 2020, and the guy was one of the highest big time throw rates in college football, much higher than some of the other top passers, like even much higher than what CJ Stroud was at last year. So, I mean, he's definitely still, I think, one of the best quarterbacks in college football. You can't deny the talent. And I think the way, he's not a polished product. We'll see how much he develops this coming season. But, I still think he's much further along than a lot of people think he is. So, I'm excited to see what he can do. I think, playing in this offense will, be very good for him. And he's got a lot of weapons to really tap into at his disposal. I mean, I think it's on par with what he's had over the last couple of years. I mean, people forget, Oklahoma didn't win the Big 12 title in 2020 because everybody else was great. Spencer Rattler stunk. I mean, he was, again, an elite quarterback that year. That's why they got him to that point. So, I definitely think that he's going to prove, some people wrong this year, right? And I think he's going to have a pretty good year for South Carolina.
Yeah, Anthony, to your point, you mentioned the Superman comment, Lincoln Riley, and that's what stood out because I'm not sure, how much you're able to keep up with Shane Beamer, his comments, obviously on a daily basis, but he made the point in his Tuesday press conference yesterday that we're not asking Spencer Rattler to be Superman, right? I think Beamer has done a really good job, and I'd love to get your take on this because I know you're high on Shane Beamer, and most folks are because he's just one of those guys that he's infectious, and it's hard not to pull for a guy like that. But I think he's done a really good job of handling Spencer Rattler in regards to not putting all of the pressure on him because obviously, hey, Spencer Rattler's got a lot to prove to himself, to the NFL, to national folks like yourself. So I think Beamer has done a really good job. Hey, let's not put any more pressure on this dude than he's already got. And I think you've seen a night and day difference in regards to what the pressure was like when he was at Oklahoma versus what he's feeling now going into this season.
For sure. And I think, like you said, I'm very high on Shane Beamer. I think what he's doing at South Carolina, it's talked about a lot, but I don't think it's talked about enough because you can see it across the board, especially on the recruiting front. I mean, you could definitely see, a massive, massive payoff so far with what he's done there. And I think there's even more to come in that regard. But, with Spencer Rattler, I did see that comment, and that's everything I've said about Spencer over the last couple of years. I mean, he does have that sometimes he's a little bit too willing to play outside the structure of the offense, right? He'll abandon clean pockets and bite pressure in, but you look at what he can do outside the pocket on the run. I mean, that's some of his best football, but you don't really want to live and die by that play style because he'll get some volatile outputs every once in a while. And so I think that's a very key thing. And I'm happy to hear that, he even publicly admitted like that's kind of the area for Spencer to kind of grow in because there's no doubt that was kind of I don't want to say it was an issue that was so damaging to, the Oklahoma offense as a whole. I mean, again, he could have been starting at 127 other FBS programs last year, and he's a starter from start to end. We're talking about a completely different situation. Maybe he's in the NFL at this point. Who knows? But, that's definitely the big thing that they need to reel in there. But again, with this offense, I think it will definitely help that. I think you'll get a little bit more of a friendlier approach, a little bit more distinctive and, going to that check down there. I think that's going to be key for him this year. So, I think kind of taking the pressure off him is pretty significant. And, even Spencer admitted, like, entering last year, that it was a little bit too much for him. And I thought that was kind of, you see the humanization aspect of it. And I think that's a good thing for him to admit, just flat out say, like, yeah, there was a lot on my plate last year. The Heisman favorite and a favorite to be the number one overall pick. At the same time, you got many people calling you the villain. They don't like you for some reason, people saying that you're a bad person, it doesn't make anyone feel good. It doesn't matter who you are. So, I think that's definitely a key thing there. And I think the path that he's kind of taken with developing Spencer has been pretty key there. And, even some of the comments that we've seen Spencer make, I mean, that was kind of the draw from the get-go as to why he went to South Carolina. It wasn't really on his radar, but Shane Beamer's an infectious person and he knows how to, develop players and also develop them off the field too. So, definitely all reasons to be, bullish on the Beamer era of South Carolina football.
It's funny, Anthony, you mentioned the human element. And I think sometimes, we look at numbers and we project things and we talk about the game. And sometimes we do have a tendency to forget that these are human beings. Like things affect them just like they affect us. Right. But anyways, I guess it's just the nature of the beast. I'm not going to pretend like, Anthony, I understand all the numbers and the way you guys come up with your grades on a week in, week out basis, but they are very fun to look at. So talking this Gamecocks offense first, you talk about playmakers like Jaheen Bell, Josh Vann, Austin Stogner, Antoine Wells, who was added through the portal, Marshawn Lloyd at running back. Who are some guys that you're most excited for in the Gamecocks offense and think guys that you could see grading highly on a week in, week out basis? I mean, the name that obviously jumps out to me, and I'm sure to you, is Jaheen Bell, because I just think the various ways they're going to use him. I saw somebody go on record and say they're predicting that Jaheen Bell will have a 100-yard rushing game this season. And Shane Beamer has gone on record and said if he was purely a running back, he'd be the best running back on the roster, which I was a little scared hearing that, but I think it's more of a testament to just his athleticism and just how versatile he is. Who are the guys that stand out to you and you think that Gamecock fans will be seeing on a week in, week out basis, grading highly for Pro Football Focus?
I mean, there's several we could bring up, but definitely Jaheen Bell. He's that top guy, right? And, exactly like you said, just the versatility and the ways you can kind of just get him the ball, just get the ball in his hands and let him go to work. That's the kind of player Jaheen Bell is. And, Yeah, I think that's going to be the interesting dynamic with this entire offense. I think he could be one of the more valuable players on this team. Taking Spencer out of the equation, he might be the most valuable player because I think what he can do really create some big mismatches there and stress defenses, right? And you look at him along with everyone else around him, it's going to make for a very exciting offense there. I still go back to Jaheen Bell, that bowl game. I mean, it was the most productive game it's hard to pull all these games in the PFF database because there's so many. But it's definitely one of the most productive games that we've ever seen. And I think we can kind of see a highly productive player there with Jaheen Bell. And I think, just some of the eye candy that they can throw in there with him, it's going to, kind of stress some defenses there. So I definitely think he's going to be at the top of that list. I'm excited to see Juice Wells. We've been getting more and more FCS data over the last few years. And, Juice Wells and James Madison, that was one of the best players, regardless of position, at the FCS level. I think he was the fifth most valuable player, actually, since 2020 at the FCS level, regardless of position, which is pretty hard to do when you're not a quarterback. So I do think that we're going to see, I don't know, I'm curious to see what kind of level of play he will be at, but I'm pretty confident that he's going to be a highly productive player for this team. And Austin Stogner, I think he's a player that could have a big bounce back year. Of course, he was one of the best tight ends in the PFF database back in 2020. More of your all-around guy, but then he had that staph infection, lost a bunch of weight, like 30 pounds or something like that, close out that year. Just wasn't really the same when he was on the field since, but, kind of getting back up to speed, back to full health. He can definitely get there. I think also a dark horse too, whenever he gets, fully healthy and fully acclimated, Cory Rucker, the Arkansas State transfer, I think he's a guy that could be a good downfield weapon for Rattler there. So there's definitely, I think it's definitely a very, it's a cohesive group, right? They all complement each other very well, do their own things well. So I think if you can keep that core healthy, I mean, those are the names that are really sticking out to me.
Now, Anthony, moving to the defensive side, we could talk the edge guys, Birch, Strawn. I think we'll both have pretty big years at the linebacker position. I think Brad Johnson, most likely, he is the returning leading tackler. I think he'll probably be in that position team in tackles. But really, when you talk about this Gamecocks defense, I mean, it starts with Cam Smith, preseason All-American. I know he grades as one of the highest graded defensive backs in the country for you guys. Just talk about his game a little bit. Obviously, this is somebody, again, you're really high on, and you see being one of the top draft picks, or at least I think probably a first rounder, one of the top DBs at minimum taken in this year's draft. But somebody that, again, I think when you're looking at you guys model the Pro Football Focus grades, I think he's going to be somebody I would imagine week in, week out is going to be near the top.
Exactly. I mean, like you said, one of the highest graded cornerbacks last year. And it's been awesome to kind of see like his rise because nobody knew who Cam Smith was, even like last year, right? Even in the season, nobody knew who he was. And then all of a sudden, March, April starts to roll around. You get those way too early 2023 mocks, and now everybody's calling him the best corner. And we had him there in our early top 10 returning cornerback rankings back in, I think it was like January around the national title game. We had him in the top 3 alongside Eli Ricks and Clark Phillips. He's definitely one of the best guys. And, his game, he reminds me just like the alpha mentality that he plays with is very reminiscent of J.C. Horn, right? You could just see just the physicality that they play with. I mean, that's how he wins. And it goes really a long way there. And I think that's what makes him such a valuable player. And you also throw Darius Rush there opposite him. I mean, I think that's a very slept on cornerback duo in college football. And I think that's going to be kind of the backbone of this South Carolina defense. And really that's the position you want to be, very, good at and highly successful at. So I think when you have that there, and then you also you look at the defensive front, it's a little bit less proven, but just a bunch of potential there, right? I mean, I think nobody's going to deny that you could, reasonably say, 2 or 3 of those guys could break out and be very, very good, productive players in the SEC. Nobody would, bat an eye. There's definitely potential up front. If they can get to that level, kind of closer to their ceiling that people have been expecting to see over the last couple of years, this could be a much better group than a lot of people expect. But it all starts at the cornerback position, especially with Cam Smith there. I mean, he brings the alpha mentality week in and week out. Very good ball production. I mean, he's going to bring that this year for the Gamecocks.
Now, Anthony, one of the reasons I'm so excited to chat with you on a week-in, week-out basis is because we get a look at the Gamecocks' opponent every single week. And, of course, Georgia State first up on the slate, the season opener for the 2022 season. Sean Elliott returns to Williams-Brice Stadium. Tons of great storylines in this one. Jordan Strawn, again, taking on his old team. Jamias Williams at running back for State, taking on the Gamecocks, coming back, obviously formerly played defensive back in Columbia. But just talk about first offensively, and I think that's really going to be the bread and butter for GSU. What you see from them, they've got a two-headed monster in the backfield. Terrence Gregg, Jamias Williams, both preseason Doak Walker Award watch list guys in the preseason. Both basically ran for 1,000 yards last year. Their transfer quarterback in from Furman. But it really does sound like, obviously, again, we know Sean Elliott was the offensive line coach here. He's going to bring a physical nature, physical mindset. And this is a Georgia State team that has played SEC teams really tough and beaten SEC teams at their place. You look at Auburn last year, who they probably should have won that game, beat Tennessee and Knoxville a couple of years ago. So Georgia State will not be intimidated by the environment. But again, Anthony, back to the offensive side, that two-headed monster at running back, what do you see from those guys specifically? And again, I'm not sure if you guys do the grades for teams like Georgia State, because I guess they're not a Power 5, but I know that's a team you guys keep an eye on, because again, they're one of those pesky giving SEC teams like South Carolina trouble on a yearly basis.
Yeah, we definitely got all kinds of data on them. We got FCS, we got Division III, we got USFL, CFL, we got it all. So we definitely got Georgia State in there. And this team, very run-centric team, right? They want to run the ball like 60% of the time. It's one of the highest rates in college football. It's a thing that it's a boom or bust style, right? Because if you don't get out to that lead early, like Auburn, for example, they got out to that lead early. Like you said, they probably should have won that game, right? I mean, I think they had 24 something at half there, and then blanked in the second half. But if they can get out to that early lead, and then they can kind of play their offense the way they like to. So it's running the ball, and then in the passing game, it's almost solely they want to bring you up. They want to bring the defense in to stop the run, and when they bring those guys up to the line of scrimmage, okay, they're going to pull out the play action fake, and they're going to go long with the ball, and they're going to try and get some explosive pass plays out of you and try to catch you off guard. So they like to keep the defense on their toes, but if you don't get out to that early lead and you're down, you can't win with that style, right? Next thing you know, you have to win with the pure drop back passing game. And this offense just quite frankly can't do it, right? With that offensive line in the quarterback position, when you lose that kind of the friendly nature of the offense that's kind of helped out by the play calling and just a supporting cast, that's when you can kind of get down and look at the North Carolina game, for example, early last year. That's what kind of killed them in the end. So I think it's very important for South Carolina to kind of get out there up front. And I think at that point, there's no worry there, just because, like I said, it's a run-centric offense. The passing game, it's almost all play action. That's about 60% of the time. And if you load the box, that's where they're going to kill you there. And like I said, they're not going to be able to do that if they have to win with the arm. If they get down to a little bit of a couple score lead, it's going to be tough for them to overcome there. So it's definitely an offense that's very heavily supported by the coaching staff and the play calling. They definitely have talent there, like you mentioned, Greg being the main one at running back. But again, I really do think that, that's just going to be the key there. And I don't really foresee them getting out to a big lead here. And again, you look at even too, you throw in, if you're trying to win in the true drop back passing game, you need your receivers to beat the corners. And that's just, you look at South Carolina's corners, like we've talked about, they don't have the horses on offense at receiver to really go toe to toe with them. I mean, Cam Smith, next thing you know, he's going to have 5 pass breakups, maybe an interception in there. So it's going to be a tough matchup for this Georgia State offense, in my opinion. I think the defense is probably a little bit better equipped than the offense at this point. Just from our power ranking perspective, the defense is much higher there. And again, it goes a lot back to just the way they kind of play the game. It's just very hard to win with that on a week-to-week basis. And that's where you kind of get the boom or bust results. Last year's team kind of, I would say, exceeded expectations, but our simulation, our models are kind of saying that they're probably going to take a step back towards expectation, which is kind of the middle of the pack team there. Definitely a mid-tier team in the Sun Belt. So I think it's going to be really, really tough for them.
Yeah, Anthony, I think what's so intriguing about this game is, last year South Carolina's deficiency or weakness, if you will, was line of scrimmage really on both sides. They struggled to run the football consistently, and they struggled to stop the run. You're going to get a test. You're going to get a challenge in this first game, again, especially when you factor in that Sean Elliott's the head coach and the physicality he preaches, and they're going to want to punch the Gamecocks in the mouth. But this should be a game, looking at the Georgia State defense, for example, this should be a game that South Carolina should be able to, I think, establish, I say dominance, but establish themselves up front, win that battle at the line of scrimmage and get a push. And really, I think, score a lot of points in this one, because I look at this game and I'll lock in my prediction for the game specifically on Friday. But I said this over the summer, and my mind really hasn't changed. I think Georgia State is going to give South Carolina a really good game early, especially. but I just don't know how Georgia State is going to keep up with all those athletes the Gamecocks have offensively. And again, then you factor in the line of scrimmage. While this O-line wasn't good a season ago, 129 returning starts, 7 guys who have started 6 or more games for you in a season. The entire two deep is back, and you're going to have the size advantage purely when you just look at that Georgia State front. And again, so I'd love to get your thoughts. I do feel like the Gamecocks should be able to have some pretty significant success on Saturday night offensively.
Oh, for sure. And like you said athleticism and size, and you look at Power 5 versus Group of 5, that's why the group Power 5 almost always wins, right? And you'll have some exceptions to that. But in this case with South Carolina versus Georgia State, I mean, that's just really the whole story there. It's going to be tough for them to keep it up. I really do think South Carolina is going to have a high power explosive offense this year, just given all the dynamic weapons that they do have. And you mentioned the offensive line. If I had to pick in it, like a concern I have, it is the offensive line. But you have to feel confident that the group is going to be better just given the experience, right? Just because, most of the time, you don't, if you throw first time starters in there right away, it doesn't matter if you're a 5-star or whatever, you're going to struggle. It's
Right.
about experience. It's about getting reps. And by the time you close out your collegiate career, you're kind of at least performing at a sustainable level, right? At any level of football, as long as you're not a liability up front, it's going to be fine. And I think that they should have the growth there to get out of that kind of liability range, which I think is fair to say that's where they were at previously. So I do think that it will be very difficult for Georgia State to keep up. And like I said, if Georgia State gets down, 7-10 points, they're not going to be able to play the game that they want to play, and they're going to get uncomfortable, right? And so you're going to have to they're going to put a lot of stress on the quarterback, and they just don't have the quarterback to really keep up there, right? I'm going to take Spencer Rattler 10 times out of 10 there. I think this is going to be, a game where South Carolina can put up like a lot of points. I agree with you there.
Mm-hmm. Anthony, this has been incredible, man. Last thing before I get you out of here, of course, since you and I last spoke, a lot of predictions have come out for the season. We've seen everywhere from 7-5, 8-4. I've gone on record at an 8-4 prediction. I won't ask you to necessarily lock in a prediction, but for the folks who did not hear our first conversation, maybe this is their first time hearing of you. And again, Jesse Jacobs asks, who is this? Anthony Treash of Pro Football Focus, of course. That's who he is. Your just thoughts overall in year 2 of the Shane Beamer era. Again, do you agree with the projections of around 7-5, 8-4 for this football team? Again, some have projected more, some have projected less. But where do you kind of fall, and how do you see this Gamecocks football team? Where do you see them falling in regards to a really tough and competitive SEC East and the SEC as a whole?
Yeah, I mean, I'll throw out a record prediction right there with you. I like 8-4. I mean, I think this is going to be an 8-4 team. I think they're going to win some games that a lot of people don't think they will. You look at the SEC East. Obviously, it's one of the toughest division, if not the toughest division in the entire country. But again, I think that they have just the underrated pieces on offense to get there. I look at a team like Kentucky, and I think it's an interesting case study because I do think that Will Levis is like, I think Spencer Rattler should be viewed much higher than Will Levis. And it's interesting to kind of see that I consider Will Levis kind of like a junior version of Spencer Rattler. They're very similar in what they have to offer from an arm talent perspective. Just ultra quick release, good enough athlete, can do some stuff on the run. But, again, I think Spencer Rattler is just a little bit more, he has a better understanding of the game. He knows how to, take advantage of the arm talent that he does have. So I think that's kind of the deciding factor there. And I personally think South Carolina is a better team than Kentucky. And I think if you look at Tennessee, I think it's a very good system that they have there with Coach Heupel. It's a very up-tempo approach. They like to spread you out sideline to sideline. It's very friendly for the quarterback. There's not a friendlier offense in college football to the quarterback than what Tennessee has to offer. And again, you go back to the quarterback, and if you need a play, it's Hendon Hooker, I think, is a good manager of that offense, but he can only do so much, right? You can only live off of that system so much, and it can burn you from time to time, especially when you're down there. So I do think that we're going to see some interesting matchups there with South Carolina. Like I said, maybe they drop a game that they shouldn't, but I think that they're going to win multiple that a lot don't expect from them. So, I think they should be viewed, right there, the second tier of the SEC East. Obviously, Georgia's up there up top, and who knows? Maybe they can give Georgia a good game, right? I'm not going to go out there and say that they're going to beat the Bulldogs, but again, it goes back to the quarterback position and the biggest thing in college football, because it doesn't get talked about enough, the quality of quarterback play in college football, even in the SEC, it's not great, right? So you just need someone that can go out there and make a play. And there's not many of them out there, but I do think South Carolina has that guy. And when you have that guy, you're going to win some, big games that, again, that a lot of quarterbacks can't. So I think that's where I kind of go back there with that prediction of 8-4. And, I wouldn't be surprised if it's 7-5. And honestly, if you said it was one more than that, 9-3, I wouldn't be too surprised either. Like I said, I think this is a very slept on, very underrated group.
Anthony Treash, Pro Football Focus. Again, Anthony, thank you so much for taking the time. I'm truly looking forward to doing this each and every single Wednesday, and especially this time next week and going throughout the season. We've actually got some on-field ball to talk about, my friend. Talking season has mercifully come to an end. Thank you so much, man, again, taking the time. Have fun at the wedding, by the way, this weekend. Hopefully you still get to catch some ball. A lot of great games this weekend, of course. But, man, thank you so much for doing this, and we'll talk to you this time next week.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I'm going to be pulling phones. I might have to borrow my fiance's phone and just stream multiple games right there. But, yeah, I will. Appreciate you having me on. Looking forward to talking some actual football, real games next week.
Absolutely, man. Take care, Anthony. We'll talk next week.
You too.
All right, man. Great stuff.